Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into one of the planet's most enduring mysteries, really, the Bermuda Triangle. Our mission basically is to take this huge stack of sources we've gathered, everything from those pseudo-historical books that really spun the legend, right up to official government reports and serious research and unpack what's really going on. We want to separate the facts, which are fascinating enough, from fiction, which is often, let's face it, pretty compelling. We'll look at its origins, the really wild theories, and also the hard work done to debunk a lot of the sensational stuff. And just to set the stage, let's kick off with an incident that, well, it always gives me a bit of a chill. Picture this. Halloween, 1991. Radar controllers are watching a Grumman Cougar jet. It's climbing. Everything looks normal. The pilot, John Verdi, he has to go up to 29,000 feet. Okay, permission granted. The jet keeps climbing, and then just fades right off the radar scope. No mayday, no sign of trouble, just gone. One radar sweep, it's there. The next, empty sky.
That is a genuinely unsettling image, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is, while that's fairly recent, these kinds of strange stories, they go back centuries. Even someone like Christopher Columbus back in 1492 on that famous voyage, he logged some pretty bizarre things in his journal. He talked about the stars seeming to move erratically, a weird light that would vanish and then reappear, and strangest of all perhaps, this glowing disc-shaped object that apparently shot out of the water and up into the sky.
Hold on, a glowing disc in 1492? That almost sounds, that sounds tailor-made for this kind of mystery. What do people make of that today?
Well, yeah, it does sound convenient, doesn't it? Some investigators, particularly those inclined towards fringe theories, they definitely grab onto that as proof of alien activity or UFOs. You can see why. But others try to find more rational explanations, maybe distant shore lights, atmospheric phenomena, perhaps even a meteor entering or leaving the atmosphere over the ocean in an unusual way. Either way, it really highlights how deep this mystery runs, spanning centuries of accounts that can be interpreted, well, in vastly different ways.
It really does. Okay, so let's try and pin down this legendary area a bit more. Right, the basics first. When we say Bermuda Triangle, are we talking about like an official place on a map? Because I've looked and you don't see it labeled on charts.
You're absolutely right. No, it's not on any official map. It's a loosely defined region in the western part of the North Atlantic Ocean. The corners, generally speaking, are usually pegged around Miami in Florida, the island of Bermuda itself, and San Juan in Puerto Rico, roughly.
Okay, so a triangle shape. And even loosely defined, that sounds like a pretty big area of ocean. But I've heard the size can really vary depending on who's talking about it. How big are we actually talking?
Yeah, that's where it gets fuzzy. There's no official size because it's not an official place.
Yeah.
So depending on the author or the source you're looking at, it can range from maybe 500,000 square miles all the way up to over 1.5 million square miles. Some accounts even stretch its supposed influence way out, sometimes even as far as the coast of Ireland, although that's definitely pushing it. So yeah, the exact borders are very fluid.
Wow, 1.5 million square miles. That's huge. And this isn't some, empty, forgotten part of the ocean, is it? We're not talking about the middle of nowhere.
Not at all. And that's actually a really crucial point that sometimes gets lost in the sensationalism. This area sits right on top of some of the busiest shipping lanes in the entire world. It's a major highway for cargo ships, cruise liners, private yachts, you name it. Plus, tons of air traffic flies over it too.
Yeah.
That constant activity is really key to understanding the whole thing. Now, you mentioned Columbus earlier. His accounts are sort of the ancient whispers, right? But the modern urban legend, the Bermuda Triangle, as we sort of know it today, that really kicked off much more recently in the mid-20th century.
Okay, so Columbus provides the old, maybe ambiguous weirdness. But when did this idea of a modern danger zone, this specific triangle, start to form? Who put those pieces together?
Well, it started bubbling up around 1950. There was an article by a writer named Edward Van Winkle Jones in the Miami Herald. The Associated Press picked it up, so it got wider distribution. That was maybe the first popular suggestion of unusual disappearances clustering there. But the guy who really drew the triangle on the map, so to speak, and gave it that shape was George X. Sand. In 1952, he wrote an article for Fate magazine. And the title was pretty evocative, See Mystery at Our Back Door.
See Mystery at Our Back Door. Okay, that definitely sets a tone. So Sand draws the triangle. What specific incidents did he use in that article to build this case that something weird was happening there?
He pulled together several disappearances that had happened since World War II, which started to create this narrative of a pattern. He mentioned things like the Sandra, a tram steamer lost in 1950, and of course the really famous one, Flight 19, those 5 Navy bombers that vanished in December 45. He also included the 2 British airliners, the Star Tiger and the Star Ariel, both passenger planes that disappeared in 48 and 49, and a DC-3 charter flight, also lost in 48. It was a compelling list when you put them all together like that.
And Flight 19. Yeah, that one is definitely central to the whole myth. I remember hearing about the pilot's radio calls, sounding totally lost and confused, saying things look strange. What were those actual reports?
Flight 19 is absolutely key. Alan W. Eckert wrote about it again in 1962 for the American Legion magazine. And he included that, quote, attributed to the flight leader, Lieutenant Charles Taylor. Things like, we cannot be sure of any direction. Everything is wrong. Strange. The ocean doesn't look as it should. I mean, language like that is just fuel for the fire, isn't it? It suggests something fundamentally off, something unnatural. No wonder it became such a cornerstone.
Yeah, that is chilling phrasing. Okay, so we have Jones, then Sand drawing the map and listing incidents. But who really took it mainstream? Who cemented the name Bermuda Triangle in everyone's mind?
That would really be Vincent Gaddis. In February 1964, he published an article called The Deadly Bermuda Triangle in Argosy magazine. That piece was crucial. It brought Flight 19 together with other stories, framing them explicitly as a recurring pattern of mystery in that specific area, even stretching back into the 19th century. And the very next year, 1965, Gaddis expanded that article into a whole book, Invisible Horizons. That really solidified the concept and gave it a much bigger audience.
Right, Gaddis coins the term, and then comes Charles Berlitz, and the whole thing just explodes, doesn't it? His book was absolutely massive in the 70s.
Oh, completely. Charles Berlitz published The Bermuda Triangle in 1974, and it became a colossal bestseller. Millions of copies sold worldwide. It just blew the lid off. What's interesting with Berlitz, though, is his background. He'd already written a book in 1969 called The Mystery of Atlantis. And through that research, he apparently became utterly convinced not only that Atlantis was real, but that it was somehow connected to the Bermuda Triangle. He even brought extraterrestrials into it, suggesting maybe leftover Atlantean tech or alien intervention was causing the disappearances. His ideas were incredibly popular, captured the imagination, but yeah, critics and scientists pretty widely labeled them as pseudoscientific because there just wasn't any real evidence.
Okay, so Berlitz isn't just talking disappearances. He's weaving in Atlantis. That adds a whole other dimension of, well, speculation. What were some of his specific, let's say, unconventional theories about Atlantis, especially the ones he used to push back against his critics?
Yeah, he definitely doubled down on some pretty wild stuff in his 1984 book, Atlantis, The Lost Continent Revealed. That book was explicitly written to counter the skepticism. One of the most out there ideas he promoted was that the ancient Atlanteans actually had nuclear weapons and that their civilization was destroyed in a massive nuclear war. Guy P. Harrison, a skeptical researcher, specifically called these claims nonsensical. I mean, projecting nuclear war onto a mythical ancient society. Yeah. It's quite a leap based on zero archaeological evidence.
Nuclear war in Atlantis. Wow. Okay. So definitely imaginative. Did he have any other ideas about Atlantis' demise that were maybe slightly less explosive?
He did offer other possibilities, too. He suggested Atlantis might have been located right in the middle of the North Atlantic and that it sank slowly over a long period due to natural geological causes. Specifically, he pointed to volcanic activity around the Azores. He even mentioned islands like Corvo and Flores, claiming they'd changed shape over time, with bits supposedly vanishing into the sea. So he was trying to use some real geology, or at least geological change, to support this idea of a slow natural sinking.
Right, trying to mix in some plausible geology there. But how did he explicitly connect this sinking Atlantis, whether slow or fast, to the actual disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle? What was the proposed link?
This is where it gets really interwoven. He essentially argued that Plato's original story about Atlantis sinking was basically true. Then he linked it to the Triangle area by talking about things like a huge, supposedly located submerged pyramid near the Bahamas. He claimed it was Atlantean, but conveniently, the diver who allegedly found it wouldn't reveal the coordinates. Very mysterious. He also told a story about an island supposedly popping up out of the Atlantic in 1882, complete with bronze artifacts, only to sink again. And naturally, the ship's log detailing this was supposedly destroyed in the London Blitz. He seemed to connect this to other finds, implying Atlantean ruins were surfacing. And crucially, he tied it all together by referencing the psychic Edgar Cayce, who had predicted before his death that Atlantis would be rediscovered between 1968 and 1969. So for Berlitz, the submerged ruins of Atlantis, or perhaps its leftover dangerous technology or some kind of energy field, were directly causing the ships and planes to vanish in the Bermuda Triangle. It neatly explained everything with one big, unproven idea.
It is kind of amazing how these theories, even labeled pseudoscientific and having, as the sources say, slim to non-existent evidence, just took hold so powerfully. What is it about these really outlandish ideas that captures the public imagination so strongly?
Well, I think it taps into a very fundamental human desire for answers, especially when faced with the genuinely terrifying unknown, like planes or ships vanishing without a trace. When there's a lack of clear information or when events seem to defy easy explanation, people are often drawn to the most dramatic or extraordinary narratives. These theories, however fantastical, offer an explanation. They fill that void. And let's be honest, the idea ancient superbeings with lost technology or aliens or mysterious forces, it's just inherently more exciting, more memorable than maybe, bad weather or a simple mistake. It provides a grander story.
Okay, so as fascinating as those grand stories are, eventually scrutiny and, well, actual research starts to catch up. And for the Bermuda Triangle, the big turning point, the major debunking effort, really comes down to one key figure, Larry Kuesch. His work seems pivotal.
Absolutely pivotal. Larry Kuesch's 1975 book, The Bermuda Triangle Mystery, Solved, was a game changer. Because unlike many before him, he didn't just repeat the stories, he went back to the original sources. He checked newspaper archives, official accident reports from the Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, weather records, all the stuff the sensationalist writers had apparently skipped or ignored. It was proper investigative work.
So if you had to boil it down, what were Kuesch's biggest findings? What did he uncover that just systematically dismantled this whole legend?
Probably the single most important finding was statistical. He demonstrated that the number of ships and aircraft reported missing in the Bermuda Triangle was not significantly greater proportionally than in any other heavily traveled area of the ocean. It wasn't that more things vanished there, it was just that the disappearances that did happen there got way more attention, were hyped up, and compiled into this supposed pattern. The mystery was manufactured, basically.
Right, so the core premise that it's an unusually dangerous place was fundamentally flawed from the start. It wasn't a statistical anomaly, it was a reporting anomaly. What else did his research show?
He found that many, if not most, of the disappearances weren't really mysterious at all when you looked at the facts. Many happened during major storms or hurricanes, which the mystery writers conveniently forgot to mention, or sometimes even claimed the weather was calm when records showed otherwise. He also found that the numbers themselves were often inflated. A boat gets reported overdue, makes it into a triangle book, but then it turns up later safe and sound, and that correction never gets made in the mystery narrative.
That's pretty damning, isn't it? Either incredibly sloppy research or potentially deliberate misrepresentation. Can you give an example of that kind of factual error he exposed?
Oh, there are many.
Huh.
He pointed out how Berlitz, for example, included a plane that supposedly vanished mysteriously in 1937. Kuesch found records showing it actually crashed off Daytona Beach, Florida, in front of hundreds of witnesses, hardly a mystery disappearance.
Wow. A crash with hundreds of witnesses gets spun into a Bermuda Triangle enigma. How does that even happen? So Kuesch essentially concluded the whole thing was a manufactured mystery.
That was his term, yes. He argued it was built and perpetuated by writers using, as he put it, misconceptions, faulty reasoning, and outright sensationalism. He cited specific examples, like how Berlitz treated the Donald Crowhurst case, a yachtsman who faked a round-the-world voyage and likely committed suicide as an unsolved triangle mystery, despite the known facts. Or Berlitz recounting an ore carrier lost in the Pacific Ocean as if it vanished in the Atlantic Triangle. Kuesch's meticulous fact-checking was so thorough, it really took the wind out of the sails of the whole phenomenon.
Okay, so Kuesch delivers this major debunking from an investigative standpoint. But what about official organizations? The ones actually responsible for maritime safety and accident investigation, did they weigh in?
They did, and their findings align perfectly with Kuesch's conclusions. For instance, when Channel 4 in the UK did a program on the Triangle in 1992, they talked to Lloyd's of London, the big marine insurance market. Lloyd's stated clearly that they saw no evidence of unusually high numbers of sinkings in that area. And crucially, they don't charge higher insurance premiums for ships sailing through the Bermuda Triangle. If it were truly riskier, you can bet they'd be charging more. That's a powerful financial reality check.
That's a great point. Follow the money, right? And the U.S. Coast Guard. They must deal with incidents in that region constantly. What's their official position?
The Coast Guard has been consistently skeptical. Their official statements say they review disappearances and find nothing that would indicate that casualties were the result of anything other than physical causes. They explicitly state, no extraordinary factors have ever been identified. They even pointed out inaccuracies in specific cases, like the tanker VA Fog, which sank in 1972. One triangle book claimed only the captain's body was found mysteriously clutching a coffee cup. The Coast Guard countered that they actually recovered several bodies and photographed the wreck. Oh, and it sank off the coast of Texas, nowhere near the triangle.
Off the coast of Texas. Okay, that's stretching the definition even for the triangle. So the Coast Guard is firmly in the explainable causes camp. What about other scientific bodies, like NOAA or the Navy?
Same story. NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, attributes most disappearances to known environmental factors. The volatile weather like hurricanes, the powerful Gulf Stream current carrying debris away, and the navigational hazards of shallow waters in some parts of the region. The U.S. Navy also dismisses any supernatural explanations, emphasizing natural causes and, significantly, human error. And maybe most tellingly, the U.S. Board on Geographic Names, the official body for place names, doesn't even recognize Bermuda Triangle as an official geographic name. There's just no scientific or geographic basis for singling it out.
So across the board, the official and scientific consensus is clear. It's a busy, sometimes dangerous stretch of ocean, but not uniquely mysterious. What about the wider scientific community looking at paranormal claims in general?
Well, researchers like Ernest Taves and Barry Singer made the astute point that mysteries in the paranormal are often simply popular and profitable. This creates a market bias. Sensational books sell better than careful, skeptical analyses that conclude nothing unusual here. Maybe one final nail in the coffin. In 2013, the Worldwide Fund for Nature did a study identifying the world's 10 most dangerous waters for shipping. The Bermuda Triangle didn't even make the list.
Didn't make the top 10. Wow. That really puts it in perspective, doesn't it?
It certainly does. And as Benjamin Radford, a scientific paranormal investigator, summed it up, finding lost planes or ships at sea is incredibly hard anyway. The ocean is vast. A mystery, he stressed, doesn't automatically equal paranormal or unexplainable. Often it just means people haven't done their homework or double-checked the facts. The whole triangle enigma seems largely built on that failure.
Okay, so it seems crystal clear that the official verdict is case closed on the supernatural front. But, before Kusha really laid it all out, and even today for some people, these fantastical explanations were and are really compelling. Let's explore some of those, starting with the paranormal ones. Even if they lack evidence, they're definitely part of the story.
Oh, absolutely. And they are imaginative. One of the big ones, obviously tied to Berlitz, was the idea of leftover technology from Atlantis. This often got linked to things like the Bimini Road, that underwater rock formation near Bimini in the Bahamas. Some people claimed it was man-made, part of Atlantis, maybe still emitting some kind of energy causing the disappearances, tying in to Edgar Casey's prediction about Atlantis being found there around 1968.
Right, the Bimini Road, which geologists are pretty clear is a natural formation, right? Beach rock, I think.
Exactly. It's been identified as natural beach rock formations. But yeah, believers saw it as proof.
So natural geology gets interpreted as ancient alien tech base, okay? What other far-out ideas were floated?
Well, you get into things like parallel universes or time-space warps. The theory being that there's some kind of rift or portal in the triangle that just sucks things elsewhere, into another dimension, maybe another time. Explains why no wreckage is found, right?
Wait, convenient.
Very. And then, of course, the old standby. UFOs and extraterrestrials. Abductions, maybe. Or aliens interfering with equipment. Columbus's sighting of that disc-shaped object often gets trotted out as supposed historical evidence for this one. Again, zero actual proof, but it makes for a good story.
Aliens are always a popular go-to for unexplained stuff, aren't they? Okay, let's pivot to the natural explanations. These are the ones grounded in science and observation, the ones officials cite. Compass problems feature heavily in the lore, making it sound like navigation just goes haywire there. What's the real deal with compasses?
Yeah, compass issues are a huge part of the legend. But it's not about some mysterious magnetic anomaly unique to the triangle. Extensive surveys have never found anything like that. The reality is much more mundane, but maybe confusing if you don't understand navigation. It's about magnetic variation, the difference between true geographic north and magnetic north, where the compass needle actually points. This variation changes depending on where you are on Earth. The triangle is one of the places where magnetic north and true north happen to align more closely for a period, where the variation angle is significant. Navigators know this, they have charts, they account for it. But for someone unfamiliar, seeing their compass not pointing true or behaving differently over a large area could seem really weird and mysterious.
Ah, okay. So it's a known, predictable feature of Earth's magnetic field, not some strange force messing things up. What other major natural factors are at play in that specific region?
The Gulf Stream is a really big one. You have to picture it as this incredibly powerful, warm current flowing north like a massive river within the ocean. Its surface velocity can be really fast, like up to 5 or 6 miles per hour in places. So imagine a small plane ditches or a boat loses power. That current can grab the wreckage or the disabled vessel itself and carry it miles away from its last known position very, very quickly. It dramatically expands the search area and makes finding debris incredibly difficult.
That makes a lot of sense. And often the most straightforward answer is people messing up. Human error must be a huge factor, right?
It's almost always a factor, and often the primary one, in official inquiries into maritime and aviation accidents worldwide, not just in the Triangle. People make mistakes, miscalculations, poor judgment, underestimating conditions, pushing equipment too hard. The example often cited is Harvey Conover losing his yacht, the Rivenoak, back in 1958. He apparently deliberately sailed into a known storm south of Florida. That wasn't mystery. It was, as some reports put it, tragic human stubbornness.
Stubbornness against a storm rarely ends well. And speaking of storms, that area is notorious for violent weather, isn't it? Hurricanes especially.
Absolutely. It's right in the path of many Atlantic hurricanes. These are incredibly destructive storms, and before modern weather forecasting and satellite imagery, ships and planes often had very little warning they were sailing or flying into one. Think about the historical context. Francisco de Bobadilla's Spanish fleet getting wiped out by a hurricane there way back in 1502. That was probably the first recorded major loss attributed to weather in the region, centuries before the Triangle was ever conceived. And it's not just hurricanes. There's also the phenomenon of microbursts or severe downdrafts. These are like sudden, violent columns of cold air that slam down onto the ocean surface and spread out with incredible force, creating intense, localized winds and waves. The sinking of the tall ship Pride of Baltimore in 1986 is sometimes cited as a possible example. The crew reported winds suddenly jumping from maybe 20 miles to 80 or 90 miles per hour almost instantly. Something like that could capsize a vessel in seconds, leaving no time for a distress call.
Wow, just instantaneous, overwhelming force. That's terrifying. Now, I've also heard about a scientific theory involving methane gas, methane hydrates on the seabed. How does that work?
Yeah, the methane hydrate hypothesis is interesting from a purely scientific perspective. The idea is that there are large deposits of methane trapped in ice-like structures, hydrates, on the continental shelves. If something disturbs these deposits, like an underwater landslide or maybe seismic activity, it could trigger a massive release of methane gas bubbles rising to the surface. Laboratory experiments have actually shown that if you bubble enough gas through water, it significantly decreases the water's density. So theoretically, a ship sailing over such an eruption could suddenly lose buoyancy and sink very rapidly, almost like falling into a hole in the water. People sometimes talk about mud volcanoes releasing gas this way too.
That sounds plausible scientifically, a ship just suddenly losing the water's support. Has this been linked definitively to any triangle disappearances, though?
It's a scientifically sound mechanism. And methane releases do happen in various parts of the world's oceans. However, the U.S. Geological Survey, the USGS, has looked into this specifically for the Bermuda Triangle region. Their conclusion is that they believe no large releases of gas hydrates are believed to have occurred in the Bermuda Triangle for the past 15,000 years. So while it's a cool theory and might explain sinkings elsewhere or in the distant past, there's no evidence it's a factor in the modern Bermuda Triangle mystery. It remains hypothetical for this specific area.
Okay, so we've got the debunking, the official stances, and the plausible natural explanations. Now let's revisit some of those specific, really famous incidents that became the pillars of the Bermuda Triangle legend. Looking back at them now with this more critical perspective, what do we really know? Let's start with an old one, HMS Atalanta back in 1880.
Right, the Atalanta. This is a British sail training ship. It vanished with everyone aboard, mostly young trainees, after leaving Bermuda for England. The widely accepted explanation, then and now, was that it simply foundered in a major storm known to have crossed its path. Compounding that, the crew was largely inexperienced. Trying to handle a large sailing ship in a severe storm would have been incredibly difficult for them. Decades later, Triangle writers tried to claim it as an early victim, but author David Francis Rain did extensive research, published in 1997, that pretty thoroughly refuted any connection to supernatural causes. It was a maritime tragedy caused by weather and perhaps inexperience.
Okay, a terrible loss, but explainable. Then there's the USS Cyclops in 1918. That was a huge U.S. Navy ship, right? Its disappearance must have made big news.
Oh, enormous. The loss of the Cyclops was, and still is, the single largest loss of life in U.S. Navy history not related to combat. Over 300 souls vanished. It was a collier carrying a very heavy load of manganese ore, and it also had one engine that was known to be damaged. It disappeared sometime after leaving Barbados. Theories at the time included storms, maybe it capsized due to the heavy shifting cargo, or even German U-boat activity during World War I, though that was largely ruled out. But the most likely explanation, especially considering two of its sister ships, Proteus and Nereus, were lost in similar circumstances carrying similar heavy ore cargoes in WWII, points to structural failure. The ship just wasn't designed for such a dense cargo. It likely suffered catastrophic hull failure due to overloading.
So a design flaw combined with overloading, not a mysterious force. That makes engineering sense, sadly. What about the Carroll A. Deering in 1921, the ghost ship found abandoned? That sounds incredibly eerie.
It must have been a very strange sight. This big, five-masted schooner found hard aground off North Carolina, sail set, food on the stove, but not a soul on board. The FBI even got involved, investigating theories from piracy to mutiny, Bolshevik sabotage, rum runners, all sorts of things. They ruled most of them out. While the exact reason the crew abandoned ship remains technically unknown, maybe they feared it was sinking in a storm and took to lifeboats, maybe there was a mutiny. It was clearly a result of human action or reaction to circumstances. No serious investigator attributed it to paranormal triangle forces. It's a maritime mystery, yes, but a human one.
Right. And then the absolute classic. Flight 19 in 1945, those 5 Navy bombers. We touched on the pilot's weird messages. What was the final official verdict on what happened there?
Flight 19 is definitely the cornerstone. 5 TPM Avenger torpedo bombers on a routine training flight out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. They got lost. The flight leader, Lieutenant Taylor, became disoriented. His compasses might have malfunctioned, or he might have misinterpreted them. He thought he was over the Florida Keys when he was actually far out over the Atlantic east of Florida. He seems to have led the whole flight further out to sea, searching for land, until they presumably all ran out of fuel and ditched in heavy seas. That was the Navy's conclusion. Navigational error compounded by deteriorating weather and running out of fuel. And the search plane that also vanished, the PBM Mariner, right? Adding tragedy upon tragedy. A PBM Mariner flying boat set out to search for Flight 19 also disappeared. But there was a report from a ship in the area of seeing a large explosion in the sky around the time and place the Mariner would have been. These Mariner flying boats had a known unfortunate nickname, flying gas tanks. They were prone to catastrophic explosions from fuel vapor leaks, especially when fully fueled for a long search mission. So, the most probable cause for the Mariner's loss was a mid-air explosion. 2 separate, explainable, though tragic, aviation accidents.
So, navigational error for the first flight, and a likely mechanical failure and explosion for the second. Tragic, but not supernatural. What about those 2 British airliners? The Star Tiger and Star Ariel lost just a year apart in 48 and 49. Big passenger planes vanishing seems harder to explain away.
Those were worrying losses, no doubt. 2 Avro Tudor the Feith aircraft operated by British South American Airways lost on routes involving Bermuda. A key factor highlighted in investigations was that these planes were operating right at the very edge of their operational range. Bermuda is a small target in a vast ocean. This meant there was very little margin for error. Any slight navigational mistake, unexpected headwinds, or minor equipment malfunction could mean the difference between making landfall and running out of fuel over the Atlantic. While the exact causes were never definitively determined due to lack of wreckage, operating at extreme range in potentially challenging conditions provides a plausible, non-mysterious context for the losses.
Operating on fumes, essentially.
Okay.
And the Douglas DC-3 in 1948. That one vanished with 32 people. Any clues there?
That was another complete disappearance. A DC-3 flying from Puerto Rico to Miami. Absolutely no trace was ever found. The official Civil Aeronautics Board investigation concluded there was simply insufficient information to determine probable cause, which sounds mysterious, but really just means they didn't have the wreckage or data to say for sure what happened. It could have been any number of things: catastrophic mechanical failure, sudden severe weather, pilot disorientation. Without evidence, it remains undetermined, but that doesn't automatically make it paranormal. It just makes it unsolved in a conventional sense.
Right. Lack of evidence isn't evidence of the supernatural. Now, what about that yacht, the Connemara the Futh in 55? The story goes it survived 3 hurricanes empty.
Ah, yes, the ghost yacht that weathered the storms. That's a prime example of how the stories got twisted. The dramatic version has it found drifting, crew gone, after somehow riding out multiple hurricanes. The reality, according to correspondence Cujet had, was much simpler. The owner noticed his yacht was missing from its mooring after Hurricane Ione had passed. An investigation showed it had simply dragged its anchor, broken free during the storm, and drifted out to sea. The crew wasn't on it when it went missing. It was an empty boat that broke its mooring. No miracle survival, no vanishing crew.
Okay, completely different story. Just a boat breaking loose. And the KC-135 Stratotankers in 1963. The story about two crash sites miles apart.
Another exaggeration debunked by Kusha. Two U.S. AF KC-135 tanker jets did collide and crash in the Atlantic. It was a known mid-air collision, a tragic accident. The sensational claim Berlitz made was about two distinct debris fields being found over 160 miles apart, implying something bizarre happened. Kush checked the official unclassified Air Force report. It stated clearly that the second crash site wasn't wreckage at all. It was just a massive seaweed and driftwood tangled in an old buoy that searchers had initially mistaken for debris. Simple misidentification.
Seaweed is an old buoy. Okay, so it seems like almost all these classic cases, when you dig into the actual records, the mystery kind of deflates into explainable, if sometimes tragic, events, but people still get lost at sea there today, right?
Absolutely. And it's heartbreaking when it happens. You have cases like Frank and Romina Leone, who vanished while fishing off Florida in 2003. Or those two teenagers, Austin Stefanos and Perry Cohen, whose small boat was found capsized off Bermuda in 2016, a year after they went missing from Florida, but they were never found. These more recent tragedies underscore the inherent dangers of the ocean. It's vast, weather can change quickly, small boats are vulnerable, modern technology helps, but it doesn't eliminate risk. These incidents remind us that the ocean is powerful and unforgiving, and searches can be incredibly difficult without needing any supernatural explanation. It just highlights the real-world challenges of maritime activity. #tagged outro.
Well, we have certainly covered a lot of ground today, haven't we? From Columbus's really strange log entries centuries ago, right through the peak sensationalism of writers like Charles Berlitz with his Atlantis and alien theories, and then tracing the careful, methodical work of investigators like Larry Kush and the clear statements from official bodies like the Coast Guard and NOAA who deal with this region every day.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey through the myth and the reality. And the arc is pretty clear, isn't it? The initial stories are incredibly compelling, they grab you. But when you apply rigorous investigation, the evidence consistently points towards natural causes. Weather, currents, geology, plus human factors like error and miscalculation, and also, significantly, misinformation being repeated and amplified, not towards paranormal forces.
It really is a powerful reminder that the truth, while maybe less fantastical, is often found in the details, in the careful checking of facts. The real stories involve physics, weather, human fallibility, which are dramatic enough in their own right. And yet, despite decades of debunking, despite the scientific consensus, the Bermuda Triangle still holds this powerful fascination for so many people. Why do you think that is? Why do these kinds of legends persist so strongly, even when the evidence points elsewhere? What's the appeal?
That is the lingering question, isn't it? Maybe it speaks to something deep in us, that desire for mystery, for something beyond our everyday understanding. Maybe we like the idea that there's still places where the map says, here be dragons, even if the dragons are metaphorical. Perhaps there's a thrill in contemplating forces beyond our control or comprehension. It makes the world seem bigger, maybe more magical, even if it's just a story. What does that persistence tell you about how we relate to information, especially in our current age? Do we always want the neat, rational explanation? Or is there sometimes a part of us that prefers the enduring unsolved riddle?
If you liked this video, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe for more content. If you want more content like this, click the link on the screen. Until next time, this has been BrainMashTV.